And welcome to our December 21st Board of County Commissioners business meeting. Just going to give you a brief overview about how we do public comment. There is just one regular agenda item, and that will have an opportunity for public comment prior to that. After our consent agenda, we'll do general public comment. That's an opportunity for anybody here or anybody on Zoom to make comments related to general county business. Make comments to the commission for anything that's not on tonight's agenda. If you're here for the redistricting conversation, there'll be a separate opportunity for public comment then. All public comments are limited to 3 minutes. We ask that you direct your comments at the commission. We'll, call on folks that are here in person first. After we've moved through whoever is here, we'll look online and see if anybody would like to provide public comment there. A reminder for anybody who's on Zoom, please plan to use the raise your hand function and staff will call on you when they're ready. I think that's just about everything. So we can dive into our consent agenda. Excuse me. Does either commissioner have any questions or wish to pull anything from consent? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask if anybody in the public wishes to pull anything from the consent agenda. Seeing no in-person hands, I'll double check for virtual hands. Getting a no nod from staff. Thank you. So we'll bring that back for a motion.
Motion to approve consent agenda item 1.
All those in, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And with that, we'll move into general public comment. Is there anybody here who wishes to provide general public comment about something that's not on tonight's agenda? Okay. Don't see any hands in person. Sarah, any virtual hands? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I didn't look far enough. I didn't look back. So go ahead and come up, Travis. Sorry. I also forgot the main attraction for this evening. Jamie, do you want to provide a bit of an introduction at all or summarize the packet for anybody who's here? You have the agenda, which just is a short version. Hopefully, if you haven't already looked, you can look up the entire agenda packet online, but Jamie will give us a bit of a summary.
Thank you, commissioners. I provided a kind of a memo to go with the map that was presented to you, I believe, on Thursday. After you met on Wednesday, we kind of tried to take everything that has happened over the past couple of weeks, including kind of the values that you discussed on Wednesday to come up with one map. I'll be completely honest with you that on Wednesday night, I thought that was impossible. There are competing values that kind of restrict the way the map can be drawn. And so this is kind of what we came up with, and I won't go through everything in the memo unless you want me to. We kind of broke out your values and criteria. And I believe that the map that you have in front of you addresses each one of the criteria the best as it can. And, I talk about a couple of things like, population wise, we were able to get close. Probably the one thing is because of kind of those competing criteria, one of the things that had been discussed was commission districts, the current commission districts kind of retaining their shape. With the criteria of moving Eudora and Baldwin into the 4th and 5th, it really kind of narrowed the opportunities to do that, which meant that the 2nd congressional district did move to the west and northwest. And so this is kind of, and the goal was to get to like one map. And it isn't that we are saying that, this is the final one, but to try to help guide your conversation to a decision, if we could compress it all into one map, we thought that would be helpful. So that's kind of what you have before you, which is taking everything that has happened over the past couple of weeks to try to get it to one map to move us towards a discussion. Questions that you have?
Any questions from other commissioners for Jamie? Well, thank you for that, Jamie. I will, I guess, just start this conversation by saying that as of today. I had a conversation with Jamie earlier this afternoon and sort of suggested one more idea for us to consider because well, I guess the main thing for me is that District 2 in this map is the one that sort of radically changes, maintains about, I think, just 2, maybe 3 of its precincts currently that are within my district. And that was in order to make Eudora and Baldwin separate and be able to come into Lawrence with enough population density to get that proportionality that is a criteria for us. Something that has sort of just settled in for me is a feeling that I want to express to commissioners and have some discussion about and hope to hear some public comment about is maybe the value of, excuse me, sort of spreading out the change so that there's some change, some significant changes to all of our districts. I'd say that's particularly true for you and I, Commissioner Willie, in terms of what would it look like if the eastern western sort of divide of the county currently looked a little bit more sectioned, and maybe there was something closer to 4 corners or sort of quadrants of northeast, southeast, northwest, and southwest. So that's part of the discussion that I would like to have, and I don't really have any questions in particular for Jamie about that, and I'm interested in commissioners' feedback about what kind of things we want to discuss further now before opening it up for public comment and getting some feedback. But I do, and I should say that to support that value of sort of spreading out the change a little bit, and having sort of 4 corners or quadrants, Baldwin and Eudora would remain in the same district. And that's in part because of conversations I've had with people. You know, it's hard. We hear all of this has been about competing values. We hear different things. And so previously in our discussions, we've talked about how we've heard some feedback about keeping those 2 cities separate, giving them their own districts. That was part of our conversation last week. But I've also heard from people who believe that there's a stronger rural voice potentially from Eudora and Baldwin's populations being sort of consolidated in a district with that in-between area and some of Lawrence to help balance out the population. So that's sort of a snapshot, and I sent Jamie a version of that, like a very draft version of that map. So that's something that we could look at further, but wanted to sort of describe some of the main thoughts I've had and themes of conversations with folks in the past week. I'm mostly curious at this time what commissioners think about how sort of best to move through the conversation, if there's a value in discussing some of our, I guess, thoughts since we last got a chance to talk and had an opportunity to consider this map that's in our agenda packet that looks quite a bit different in some ways from some of the other maps that we discussed.
So, I mean, if I remember at the last meeting we had, we sort of looked at one map. We had a towns map that we were looking at, you know, and that did sort of divide out Eudora and Baldwin, and I believe that the spokes map sort of divided that out as well. And I mean, my recollection was just sort of balancing that with some other values around, you know, that southern look, and how does that look? You know, part of me thinks that we could talk about this forever, and so at some point we're going to have to make some choices. I hear you, because I have that value around wanting to keep things like they are, you know, keep them as much like they are. We know they'll have to change a little bit, but as much like they are now. So I hear that and I understand that, but I don't know how to be honest. It may be interesting to look at the map that you've proposed and sort of talk that through. In my mind, I'm just if we are gonna put that as one district, then we'll have to look a little, I'd like to see what District 2 looks like.
Yeah, and I, just to clarify, my hope is not so much to keep things the same, but to spread out the change a little bit so that I, would be, if District 2 kept much of Eastern Lawrence, east of Mass in with North Lawrence and Grant Township, plus some of west of Mass, which is currently District 1, then it would be mostly a Lawrence district, but with Grant Township. And that, here it is. So, and, I'd say the more significant change is sort of dividing between a northwest and a southwest district, rather than, which I think gives 3 more relatively same sized rural, mostly or largely rural areas that come into Lawrence kind of just enough to collect that population. So I will say, I played around with this a little bit more right before coming or earlier this afternoon, and Clinton Township is 503 people. So that's sort of it could go either way between the purple, and this one is District 5. So the other thought I had was that it sort of spreads out the change in terms of having District 4 in the southwest corner, District 5 in the the District 4, the red in the southeast, and purple in the northwest, which would be the 2 new districts, and kind of spreads out that change.
So I can certainly appreciate that, wanting to have another discussion about how District 2 ends up with that. And I do a little worry about going backwards with what progress we do make in terms of like settling on some values and then producing maps that do those values. I wish we'd looked at that a little bit more closely within last week to this week to have a little bit more of that work done before the meeting. But I certainly appreciate that that was disproportionate. In terms of looking at the rural areas, because that is certainly a value and a focus that I have. One of the thoughts with having a larger amount of area in the west with Lecompton is to get more of those voices to balance out that there's also Baldwin as a population center and Eudora as a population center. I'm certainly willing to look at other ideas though.
I acknowledge that it's a bit of a curveball. This has been a difficult conversation to have in a short span of time because there are so many different values and considerations. I will just acknowledge, I know that a large part of our conversation has, well, I will say, been sort of avoidant of the partisan piece of it, other than the the fact that we're a partisan election cycle. But the population combination between Eudora and Baldwin and the unincorporated areas in between seem to be the strongest possibility for a non-democratic seat, whether that's Republican or independent. If you just look at the different breakdowns of the precincts around the county. So which is a value that I have heard from some people in private conversations, certainly, and what the value of keeping those two smaller communities and the unincorporated area between together. Also, just that the map that's in the packet, like, change only happens on the eastern side of the county instead of change happening in different parts of the county.
I think, to be fair, quite a bit does change and shift and alter from districts that we have now. It's easier to see it in the rural area because it's big chunks, but
Yeah.
it's certainly in terms of precincts within the city of Lawrence, big changes on every map just by necessity.
I mean, really, I don't have any more time sort of processing as I'm looking at it and trying to understand it.
I would say my reaction to the map that was in the packet was favorable. I was really pleased that it played out the stated values that we gave last week. And that won't be the whole story, I'm sure. And even just the conflicting values or competing values between to combine Eudora and Baldwin or to keep them separate. I hear almost equal voices for both. My thought was that a commissioner with one mayor, city council, that can build a stronger relationship there than having two and feeling like there isn't enough time to designate to both of those. So that was one of my thoughts in terms of separating the population centers. And then that put the larger amount of area then with Lecompton to kind of elevate that voice too.
I guess I'm curious if this, I didn't realize that y'all are processing, but if it raises any questions for Jamie in particular, or if we want to invite public comment and continue the conversation after that.
I think public comment.
Well, let's go ahead and open up for public comment. So whoever would like to start us off can come forward. The microphone is already live, so you don't have to press any buttons. And please just be sure to give us your name and Douglas County residence for the meeting minutes. Anybody have any thoughts to share with us? We want to hear them.
George Hunsinger, 922 E1450 Road. Good evening. First comment, Jamie, you did a good job on this map today, the first map that was showed. I'm like you, Karen, you accomplished what we talked about last week, keeping Eudora, Baldwin, and Lecompton separate and combining North Lawrence more with Grant Township. I think that's the map. I think that's the best map I've seen to this whole thing. And I would encourage you to choose that map. Another thing I wanted to bring back up, I've had all week to think about this, the special election. And I think it's very important that you have that special election. I'm sure you've thought of this, but you're on it right now. You're on a one commissioner, two commissioner rotation between presidential and governor election. I think it needs to stay that way, a 3 and a 2, since there's 2 new positions. You wait to 2024, you're going to have 4. You could very easily have 4 new people. That's kind of tough on one commissioner when you got 4 new people that's fresh out of the gate. And the most important thing, and I'll be the vigilante for this. I think the public has spoke that we want a special election with our new district. I think it's very loud and clear. Thank you.
I'm Michelle Eagleman. I was present at the town hall about the redistricting. The 2 new districts was clearly a bipartisan issue, which Jamie Hsu explained. It was a 60%, 40%. The people definitely want 5 commissioners, and we were to consider boundaries, keeping in mind population and communities of interest together, which I haven't heard a lot about tonight. My opinions tonight are based on my perceptions as a participant there and also at these meetings. I've already voiced my concern about spokes. The last map you put up there looked a lot like spokes, and it was the least popular or one of the least popular at the town hall, but it has seemed to have gotten a lot more traction since then. That map includes Lawrence and all 5 districts. There was also at the town hall little to no support for waiting until 2024. Like the gentleman said, I heard 0 to none people excited about waiting till 2024. They wanted the sooner the better. There's just a lot of disconnect between that meeting and what you're now talking about doing. The rural county residents, from what I heard, their concerns were clear. They did not like the dominance of the city of Lawrence governance and ideology and they didn't feel like the current or past boards represented their values or priorities. Simply a case of liberal versus conservative, in my opinion. But according to the popularity of the issue on the ballot, at least some citizens of Lawrence are also believe there's room for new people, new ideas. But it sounds like this body is very concerned about their own districts and keeping them as close to they are now as possible. America has a history of enfranchising the minority, and I know that we've talked about population and communities of interest. And so I think we have to weight those things. They're not always going to be equal. In a healthy county, state, and city, there's a balance of power, an appreciation for diversity, and proper respect for the will of the citizens. When we have leaders that are all committed to the same ideology, then openness, transparency, and alternative solutions are not desirable, but that's not healthy. It's my opinion that the commission is trying to impose their will despite what the people want. By giving the people 5 commissioners, they're going to pat themselves on the back for their magnanimity. At my table, one man said, they'll do what they have already decided to do and we'll have to live with it as usual. But they're ignoring the real issue. We don't need to redistrict in order to have 2 more liberal voices. We have enough now. At the town hall, I was excited to see democracy at work, but I see people playing politics.
Does anybody else wish to provide public comment?
I'm getting to be an old hand at this. I've never done this before in my whole life. So you guys, other than when I see you all every week. My name's Marcia Paul. I live south of Wharton. I just wanted to say that what George said, I agree with. I think that first map was a better one because there is more rural area as one area. I like the idea of Baldwin and Eudora being separate. I think that helps with good representation of those areas in our county also. And I also want to say, we still want a special election, even though you voted not to have one or not to recommend it to the governor. The people asked for a special election. 61% of the vote was for 2 new commissioners, and we didn't want them in 2024. We want them now. We want representation in our area. If you keep putting us in with Lawrence numbers of people are probably more than we are. And you can tell on the top of your maps, the percentages. That's just giving you all more people in town to tell us what we have to do or don't do. And we need representation. And the other thing I was going to say is, if you guys are going to follow through and not have a special election, then I think we should have a moratorium on major issues such as the solar and wind commercial energy coming into our county. We need a moratorium on that until after we have 5 seated at your desk.
Anybody else?
Casey Semino, Mayor of Baldwin City. So I've been discussing this quite often within our community with various citizens, with various groups within the community of Baldwin. Jamie, awesome job. This has not been an easy process. I've tried making it to every meeting I possibly could. The map you showed, I agree. I felt like tried hitting on all the points that have been mentioned throughout the entire process. So I just want to commend you on your excellent work on that map, because there's been, I don't know how many versions you've had to go through, but there's been a lot. So thank you for that. There's been talk about a special election, and I've tried discussing that as citizens have asked me as well. And I can tell you from our community, we do also feel like a special election is necessary. I know that 90 days feels like a short amount of time for somebody to run a successful election. I've done 2 of them myself. I know it's in a smaller community of 4,800 people. But I've been contested both times that I've ran for mayor as well. And it can be done. It's a lot of work for the person, but that's the type of person that I want to represent our district, is somebody that's willing to get off the ground and work for that position over the next 90 days to achieve the goal that they want and to represent our community. All the comments that I've heard tonight are similar to what I do here in Baldwin. And when I talk about Baldwin, I really speak about our school district, because I've always said within our community, we don't just represent the city limits, we represent the school district around, because everybody identifies as Baldwin City, whether you live in the city limits proper or not. So I do feel like a special election would be the best way to go on this. I do feel like we would have strong candidates. I don't care which party it is. That's not a determining factor for me. Strong candidate that wants to serve alongside with you guys and hopefully work to resolve some issues that are upcoming for your commission. So thank you so much.
Name is Debbie Yarnell, and I'm at 137 East 1400 Road. First time ever spoke in front of a governmental body, so nervous. The Douglas County voting citizenry, including many Lawrencians, spoke through the November 8th election to have rural representation via 5 commissioners on matters of major issues affecting the rural areas of Douglas County. A heavy decision is on the horizon, which will have non-reversible, everlasting environmental effects on the wildlife, the ecosystem, and the human life of the entirety of the southern west to east corridor of Douglas County. Each and every single aspect of which there are hundreds as viewed on the Planning Committee Wind and Solar Proposed Regulations website needs to be extensively studied and given serious consideration by 5 commissioners with increased rural representation. There are heavy concerns of not just wind turbines and their access roads, but the extreme high voltage overhead transmission lines crossing and near so many rural residential yards and livestock grazing lands of southern Douglas County, as this would feed toward the eastern county line. As a full-time regenerative agriculture cattle and sheep farmer of southern Douglas County, I ask this body of commissioners to vote on a moratorium on any proposed industrial wind complex until 5 commissioners can be seated. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Steve Crane from Clinton, and as you 3 know, I am furious. I am so furious that you would deliberately thwart the will of the people of this county who voted by a huge majority to go to 5 commissioners. And now you want to preserve your little fiefdoms and your power for an extra 2 years and not vote on this till 24, which means we don't have any new commissioners until January of 2025. I am disgusted, truly disgusted.
Does anybody else wish to provide comment?
Catherine Ellsworth, Eudora, Kansas. I think you know how everybody feels about the special election. That's been made pretty clear. So I just want to talk about the map. That's out of left field. Last week you said that you were going to separate Eudora and Baldwin and you were going to work that direction. And then you posted a map that went that direction on your Facebook. And then I even called Jamie because I thought, ooh, that looks great to me. Doesn't to everybody, but I thought that looks great. So I reached out to Jamie and said, okay, is this, because it said template on it. So I'm like, okay, is this the real one? And he said, yes, that was the direction you were going. So it is completely bogus to pull out a different map that puts one of the new districts up in the northwest corner. That's out of left field. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Lori Shuck. You're getting familiar with me by now, I guess. I live on North 100 Road down the southwest corner of the county. I want to echo what these fine people have said, George, Stephen, Marcia. I think we should wait on a moratorium to make any decisions on our area until you have all 5 of those in place. So I feel once again, we need to have a special election. And I think sooner than better, these small communities can make decisions a lot quicker on who they want and where they want them than the city of Lawrence, because we all know each other. And if you don't, you just go to the coffee shop and you'll hear what's going on. We're more familiar. I talked to Carrie Barth, who ran for the legislature and won. She did it in 2 months. Raised campaign funds, got signs, and went to 1,000 doors, and it can be done. There's no problem with it. And I would think maybe you guys would like some of the heat taken off of you when this comes down. I mean, it's better to divide it by 5 than have 3 people stand before the firing squad. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else here want to provide public comment? Okay, we're going to see if anybody has joined us online that's raised their hand. Oh. Okay, thanks, sir.
You're in the panel and you can provide public comment.
You can hear me now, over? Can you hear me?
Barely, if you could speak a little closer to the microphone, that'd probably be helpful.
Okay, how about now, over?
Pretty good. Even louder would be great.
Okay, I will speak loud and clear, and if you can't hear me, by all means, remind me. So I would like to point out the comments that have been made repeatedly about values. And tonight, we clearly see the different commissioners and myself. We have similar, but also dissimilar values. And that's just between 4 people. And this county has over 120,000 people. So I kind of get tired of hearing the values discussion, because every single person has a different set of values. And we aren't going to base a map off of 120,000 different values, different opinions. We're going to have to compromise with one another. That's the form of governance that we have in this democratic republic that is the United States of America. I disagree with a new map being introduced at this point in time. I respect Commissioner Reed as a commissioner and her dedication to this position, but making this about oneself rather than the long-term implications for this county, as Jamie pointed out to us, we've been a 3-commissioner county for well over a century, and that cannot happen again for another century before we expand to 7 or 9 or whatever. And have to take yourself out of it. That's being a true leader. I know you have those leadership qualities, Commissioner Reed and Commissioner Willie and Commissioner Kelly, and I would ask that you really take yourselves out of it. I know it's difficult. I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, this is what you were elected to do, is be a leader. And I would also ask that we do hold a special election. As a Democrat who wouldn't be participating in these elections based upon the new maps, it's not hard to run a campaign in a short time frame. I have participated in a congressional special election campaign. I have worked in county campaigns, not only here, but across Kansas, and a city commission race. So I understand the difficulty and the hardship that comes with working your butt off in a campaign. But if they really want this job, we want someone who's going to huff it like that. And if an independent to get the signatures, it's actually only several hundred based upon what is necessary according to Jamie Shue's citation of the law, then again, not only does that give that person the opportunity to get signatures, it puts their name in the mouths and the minds of prospective voters which is actually beneficial to them and shows those voters at the same time, this is a serious candidate. And I understand all the hardships you guys are dealing with. I recognize it and respect it. And you all have a wonderful night and a happy holiday. Thank you.
Any other virtual hands, Sarah?
I don't see any other hands raised online.
Okay, thanks. We'll come back to folks in person. Since we have so many folks with us, I'll just ask again if anybody would like to share their thoughts and offer public comment.
Good evening. I'm Philip Metzger. I live at 796 North 600 Road, Lawrence. That's south of Lone Star. The map that's presented that I have here in my hand, it was up there a while ago. I think it's not too bad. I think in between districts 3 and I think it's 3 and 5. Yes, no, yeah, 3 and 5. Right there in the middle, they need to be cleaned up a little bit. The boundaries are just a lot of loopholes and stuff right there. But I think it's what I really came up here for is I think it's about time that maybe we just make a deal tonight. If we can help you decide on a map that will serve the county and be something that everybody could work with, then if we could help you with that, maybe we have a special election and elect 2 new county commissioners in, say, the next 60 days. That's all I have to say.
Anybody else? Okay. Excuse me, I'll close public comment and bring this back for discussion amongst commissioners. Any thoughts, or does it raise any questions for Jamie or Tyler Fleming from our IT department, who I see is with us this evening also?
I would say as a point of order, Madam Chair, we did have a request, which I think we would probably have done this anyway, but it's good to clarify. We had a request through email communication that there be separate votes for the map and the recommendation for a special election or 2024. I think that was going to happen anyway, but if you would clarify for the audience.
I guess I would look at staff and just make sure, I mean, in terms of what the statute says about our resolution and how we sort of forward information to the state for their next steps. Can you shed any light on that? I mean, I think we've been treating them as 2 separate discussions.
According to the law, you only need a resolution for the map. And so we have a resolution that's prepared, and if you make changes, we can change it. What the law says is you just make a recommendation to the governor, which is just basically a communication that you've approved a map and this is your recommendation. And then the governor takes that under advisement, and then she has 5 days to make that decision. And just for a point of clarification, because I asked it, that would be 5 business days, not including a holiday and the weekend. So, because that was a question. So it only requires a recommendation. It doesn't require a resolution, but you could still take a vote on it.
Thank you. Well, then, if it's okay with Commissioner Kelly too, then I'm okay with taking separate votes on that if that feels important to do. So with that, do you have any suggestion about which issue you would like to dive into and discuss further first?
As a geographer, I will always choose maps first.
So if we're going to discuss between the 2 maps, I need to see the other map a little bit longer. I think I've had 5 minutes on that.
And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge, I recognize it's a curveball and we still have 10 days until our deadline. So, you know, leaving last week's meeting, I wasn't sure if we were going to have 1 or 2 maps in front of us to consider and narrow down that conversation. We had one. I took time to think about it. I studied it further and figured out what my feelings were, which was not about keeping area in my precinct per se, but trying to really meet the value of having change to our county districting happen in more than just one eastern edge of the county, which is what the map with 2 new districts with Baldwin and Eudora separate and 2 new commissioners being elected from one corner, one eastern edge of the county. So those were the feelings that I had about it that really went into trying to figure out how to sort of more geographically spread that out a bit and make those 3 districts geographically more compact. But I acknowledge that there's a lot of people in the public who consumed the other map, who thought about it, asked questions to Jamie about it, had discussions with us about it. And so I respect that it may not be a good idea, but I ask any of my teachers in my past, and sometimes I come up with really good or thought out 11th hour ideas. So here we are. We still have 10 days to make the decision, though I'm hopeful that we can find some consensus this evening. And I'm happy to answer any questions commissioners have about that map. I will say that the other piece of Eudora and Baldwin being together and conversations that I've had with some people have been about that county line that is shared with District County in particular, with Johnson County, sorry, in particular, and that the sense of community that exists along that county line road north to south, the impact that Panasonic and the growth that I think is already kind of happening for both areas and might expedite is going to impact those 2 areas similarly. In the northwest corner of the county, in terms of the area that would include Lawrence, that's where some growth is going to happen. It's also along the corridor that connects to Topeka.
Yeah, I guess between the 2, as I sort of process the second one, I don't really have an issue with either of them. You know, I'll just say that I do think I put some value into, and even though Mr. Stumbling Bear doesn't want us to talk about values, I think it's still fine. I do put some value in the fact that the 1st district was just elected and has 4 years in that district. And I think I think that just has something that we should weigh into. That said, I expect that I will, you know, that the commissioner who represents the 1st district, that district is going to shrink. There's no way around that. So when I looked at the map that was in the packet, I saw some shifting. I picked up some new precincts and I lost some precincts, and I understood that that was just sort of part of the process and sort of that. As I sort of look at these 2, I mean, the big thing, and I think it's something, you know, is bringing Eudora and Baldwin together. I mean, that's it for me here, is whether we think that's what we want to go with or whether we want to split them up. That's it for me. I mean, as I look at the 2, I don't see much else different about the 2.
So from my point of view, I'm comfortable with the map that was presented in the packet. If we want to look at something significantly different, I'd like to have time to ferret that out, which would mean all of us come back here and do this again, which if that's what it takes to do it right, then I'm game for that. But I definitely like in the map that's presented that known boundaries are used as often as possible. So Mass Street, Iowa Street, 23rd Street, Old 59 Highway. You spend a lot of time explaining to people like, what district am I in? Well, if you're, and right now we don't have districts we can explain very easily. And these are will still be complicated, but I liked that it had some kind of natural dividing lines, which kept, and this was in Jamie's notes that he also took into consideration, keeping some neighborhoods and neighborhood associations together when possible, which I also very much value.
Yeah. I'm trying to find a balance of, I'm not trying to be too defensive of my map. I just want to explain like other factors in it and trying to, think about the sort of neighborhood identities of Lawrence, since that is our population center and there is no way around Lawrence being a part of most districts, not all of them necessarily, but well, in this instance, almost all of the rural districts, in order to meet that population requirement, have to have neighborhoods of Lawrence. There just is no way around that, even though I recognize that really pushes against some folks' perspective and hopes about what this change will achieve. But I think of, so yellow is District 3, and that southern part of Lawrence sort of divides southern Lawrence, western Lawrence, eastern and north Lawrence, which I do think that there's some common interest and shared identity around those neighborhoods that surround downtown Lawrence, and then that north central and southeastern part of the city. So I did try and really, and so like Mass Street comes all the way down to sort of where yellow, blue, and red meet. So I tried my best to think about some of those major, and we do have some weird wonky lines in our current districts, in part to account for population. And the last time redistricting happened with the current commissioners, keeping commissioners in those districts. So that will kind of always be a part of the conversation. I think I just struggle with the idea that North Lawrence and Grant Township has a sort of shared or a community of interest with North Central Lawrence and the North Wakarusa area. I feel that is a little bit more connected towards West Lawrence and even the Lecompton area. So I think that as part of trying to bring District 2 sort of back over the river and east of Mass, at least somewhat. Because I think the map that's in the packet that Jamie created for us has the district that has Eudora has to come all the way to, I think is like 23rd in Iowa, maybe 23rd. I don't remember how far into Lawrence it goes, but instead of just sort of having that eastern or southeastern part of the city comes pretty far in. So I think that struck me as odd, I will say. It makes a strange dividing line between some neighborhoods in the city.
So no, Sarah just switched the maps, so I'm going to make a comment on the other one just to keep her on her toes. It's all right. When I served on the Extension Council, and they made an effort to also meet in other parts of the county to kind of spread out that representation and have people know these other communities rather than meeting in Lawrence all the time. And so they have a meeting in Lecompton, a meeting in Eudora, meeting in Baldwin, and I'd be jumping up and down saying, we have an event center in Willow Springs Township, let's meet there too. So the southwest corner of the county, because it doesn't have a population center, is often left out of equations. So if we're looking for how do we put some population weight in 3 different rural districts, then having a southwest Douglas County rural area that's tied in with Lawrence kind of negates that. I don't think it has enough weight there to accomplish what people were looking for.
I I don't know that I have much more to add on this. I would just say if we're going to consider the map that came tonight, I think we need to have another meeting. I think, that's not convenient for me, but if that's what we need to do, that's what we need to do. I agree with Commissioner Willie. Let's do it right. I feel like process is long. Yeah.
I think if we were to take another week, I really want to revisit like what are, and when I say the shared values for building these maps between the three of us in our discussion, I'd really like to solidify what those are so that we can come up with, if it's one or several maps that reflect those. So we have, so instead of having big discussions about wide shifts, that we're having smaller discussions about what we need to see in a map.
So I really do not have a goal of extending this unnecessarily. And so I wonder, in my conversation with Jamie, we talked about how, part of why Tyler is here this evening, who worked on creating these maps in our GIS, is that we may be able to make some sort of live changes or take a break and allow them to make some adjustments to the map that's been that was proposed as of last Thursday and in our agenda packet. I just wonder if there's any way to explore whether or not District 2 can encompass some of East Lawrence and therefore shift red is for that Eudora district to encompass a little bit of what looks like it's all inside the city limits of Lawrence, and then purple 5 is the outline. I don't garner from our conversation that there's much popularity in the map that I proposed, and I'm okay with that. It was important for me to be honest and put on the record what I think some potential issues with this map are, and my desire to spread that change around a bit instead of it being all in the eastern part of the county. But it's also true that we can, and I will say that I think we should plan to revisit these maps in 3 years. One, I think population growth will be significant enough. We'll have 5 commissioners by then, no matter what, and that it's worthwhile to, after making such a big change, to revisit it in that 3-year timeline and see what the feedback from the public is after having had an election cycle through it too.
So, I mean, if we want to get into the weeds of all of this, and the goal is to keep some of the East Lawrence area in District 1. One of the precincts that's really challenging here is precinct 10. It has 3,000 people in one precinct, and that's because it's the University of Kansas. And so all of that student housing is included in that census number. If the goal was to sort of take a break and try something to try to keep East Lawrence within District 2, you could look at precinct 10, 20, and 10 and 26. Move those around, and they may somewhat balance out with 39, 40, 33, and 35. So I'm just getting really into the weeds here, folks, on precinct mapping. And so I agree that it's important to put out the value. I don't know that that's going to get us any further. I think what we really need to do here is choose and make some decisions. I think we've articulated really well what the challenges are here, but I don't know if that's worth some time to take a break, and if Jamie's willing to take a look at a map that throws 10 into one of those other precincts to balance out some numbers, and it would create an arm essentially that comes based on that map. Make sure I get this right. So what you're seeing there in District 4, that arm that goes all the way to Iowa, right, would go up a little bit. And then I think we could pick up in District 2 some of that Eastern Lawrence sector. Just trying to make compromises is what I'm trying to do.
I appreciate that suggestion and think that, I appreciate that you are able to digest all of that precinct information well enough. I have a bunch of tabs open with all the different maps and, to be able to identify some that have particular density. So, Jamie, do you have any thoughts to share?
Well, the reason we asked Tyler to do overtime and stay here was to, that if you did want to make changes, we could do it. It takes a while. You know, something as simple as that, we could probably pull off in about 15, 20 minutes. I don't know population wise what that does. But we could try it.
I'm somewhat uncomfortable making maps on the fly. There's so many variables and this changes that, and I don't know that people want to sit through us workshopping it. I think we might be better to give direction and come back. Not really wanting to, but I want to acknowledge where you're coming from.
Well, I think I hear that. I disagree, though. I think that, I mean, if we aren't with respect to the sort of map that I proposed, which had significant changes compared to if we were considering those side by side, but I don't think that's necessary. I would like to achieve a little bit of compromise in this current map, which I think is possible to workshop in a meeting without having to continue the conversation and ask for folks to come back. I feel like in terms of, I mean, making the population density happen, that's sort of that's the thing that we're down to figuring out. If we keep Baldwin and Eudora in separate districts, how to just sort of divvy up the Lawrence portions of those seems possible in this meeting.
We did have a map as part of our packet last week that had North Lawrence, Grant Township, and Eudora Township and East Lawrence together. I think the issue there was District 1, which I think those two could switch somewhat to satisfy Commissioner Kelly's continuity.
Yeah, I think in that map option, it did, I mean, it really kind of almost flipped Commissioner Kelly to totally south of sort of one boundary right now, which is sort of similar to what's happening with my district in this map iteration. And so, and I want to respect that I've heard from enough folks that that Eudora may be interested in a new commissioner, and I respect that and want to, you know, give space for that, whether it's special or general election cycle.
I would say when I first drew that map, I did not know where Commissioner Kelly lived, so I guessed and I guessed wrong. So my intention was to have him in that northern portion, and I missed. So there would have to be, you know, redrawn from there.
I do think one of the things Jamie and I spoke before the meeting and with Tyler as well, you know, I think if they feel that they can make a change, they will. If they feel like they need more time, you know, I think the clerk is empowered to let you all know that in terms of that. If a couple of precincts is something we could work on, you do have another topic to discuss. So, you know, in the hopes of perhaps getting some of this resolved tonight, Jamie and Tyler could work on a variation of the template and we continue to discuss special election. And compared to last night, it's only, last week, it's only 6:30. It's early, you know, so.
I would ask Commissioner Reed if it's okay. Are there changes that could happen within the map that that was provided in the packet that would address those concerns, or does it have to be a complete rethink? Because there's enough that I'm not comfortable with in the second proposed map that I don't want to start from there and tweak, but we could start from here and try and address your concerns.
No, I appreciate that clarification. I think that I'm asking for some changes between 1, 2, and Eudora District 4 on there, kind of like figuring out how to shift 1, 2, and 4, which would largely leave your District 3 intact and as proposed in the packet from as of last week, and then the Baldwin City focus district largely unchanged. So I think that it's just a value of mine to sort of have that directional quadrants. That's how I just think of the county. And so I get that that's maybe not a shared perspective. So I think that bringing in some of East Lawrence into District 2 is a primary piece of it. That along with North Lawrence and just sort of that downtown district is a strange community space to draw some district lines through, in my opinion. So that's my main area of focus that impacts my district mostly. So the other parts of those values that I put into creating that, I think are just solo perspectives, and that's okay.
So that might be enough direction then for Jamie then, if we're looking at bringing more of East Lawrence into District 2 and seeing where that.
Can I get clarification? Because we were just talking about 2 and 4, but you mentioned 1. If we're throwing 1 into the mix, that includes 3 and 5, because you start to shift the whole map this way. If you're doing 2 and 4, we could probably switch some back and forth easier. But if we're also moving 1, that moves the entire map.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think I was just thinking of that because of, I think District 1 borders that 10.1 and 26.1, that part of the campus district. And so, but you're right, Commissioner Kelly talked about moving that little arm in District 4 up a couple precincts and kind of making that a larger area. So between 2 and 4, it sounds like if there's shifting that can be done there, I would like to see it.
Okay.
Jamie, do you need any further direction if we were to move on to the conversation and discuss special
No,
election for a bit?
I do need to make a point of clarification on your second topic. There will be an election in 2024 for 4 and 5, regardless of if there's a special election or not.
Yeah.
The people that are elected in the special election only serve for 1 year. And then there's an election in 24 again for the remaining 2 years. So it's not where it's a special election and then those people serve until the 26 election. They only serve until the 24 election. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. It's like you stole the words right out of my mouth. That was my top thought to clarify. So
Yeah, take your phone.
thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Tyler. Well, does that bring up any thoughts for other commissioners?
Well, I was ready to bug Jamie some more, but he left. So I'm gonna ask Sarah instead. So we have a lot of comments about what was voted on. Can you clarify what the vote for what the vote was to go from 3 to 5 and what it wasn't? So we can make some assumptions about why people voted for that, but we don't have that information. Specifically, we've heard not a lot from residents within the city of Lawrence for why they voted from 3 to 5. So it wasn't specifically a vote on a special election, and it wasn't specifically a vote on rural representation, even though we have wanted and made that very central to the conversation.
Yeah, that's correct. The ballot question was just to move from 3 to 5 commissioners. There were no maps shared, so there was no conversation about how those 5 commission districts would be put together. And there was no discussion of, because there's 2 options allowed in statute. One is a special election and one is the next general. Both of those were outlined in statute and both of those are options. And the vote did not specify an option that would be chosen as a part of that.
And I know I keep looking for the Goldilocks option that is not available to us, which is the 2023 election. And Jamie, it sounds like, has also gone back and asked again at the state just to clarify what that the statute does not allow for that. If you can just remind us again.
Yes, Jamie and County Council John Bullock had conversations with the governor's office to clarify that their understanding of the statute is correct in terms of what does the next general election mean? And the governor's office has agreed that that would be 2024. I also know from conversations with Jamie, and he can speak more about this when he gets back. My understanding is that in this last election cycle, both Potawatomi County and Brown County have also had successful votes to move from 3 to 5 commissioners under this statute. My understanding from what Jamie has said, and he has better conversations about this with county clerks and those counties, that Brown County is still deliberating maps, but Potawatomi County is closer and has decided, from what I believe, so I would consider this tentative, but they have decided to wait till 2024 for their election.
Well, I will share that while I understand the perspective of some of the comments we've heard tonight, comments received, that the election was meant for some people as sort of a demand for an immediate change. And I think that we tried to have conversations early on leading up to the election about reiterating what the process would look like and what options we had available to us. And based on conversations I've had with some people, it seems like maybe it's new information for people, and it is just not what they expected. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate the sense of disappointment. I feel quite firmly, as I stated during last week's discussion, that a general election is quintessentially, it's inevitably more democratic, and that parties will not be choosing candidates. And there will be the opportunity for parties and candidates who are considering to run for a general election, the opportunity to go out and get to know the parts of those new districts beyond their immediate neighborhood, and parts of the county that they may not be familiar with yet, and that there's value in time for that. And I just think that there's a lot of democratic value to people choosing to run, being able to throw their name in the hat, and give electors choices rather than parties making choices on behalf of the electorate.
Yeah, I appreciate all the folks who shared with us their thoughts. We hear a lot, people representing their ideas as being the entire county's ideas, and I don't agree with that all the time. And in this case, I still, all the points that I made last week are still in place for me when it comes to special election versus general election.
Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Going to make the comment on stepping into the job, just for comparison. Commissioner Reed had 5 months basically from the time that you were elected to the time that you stepped into office. My predecessor, Commissioner Portillo, had 2 months from the time of winning an election until stepping into office. And I, because it was a different process of fulfilling an unexpired term, had 2 weeks. And I think the staff would probably say that that made for some growing pains, not just for me, having them adjust to a new person and new sets of questions. And I ask a lot of questions, and I was I think it's fair to say far more prepared than most to step into this role, having run for the position, but also having served for a long time on the Planning Commission and been present in these meetings for years. The learning curve is very steep, and the learning curve for all of us working together, which is not anybody else's main concern, of course, but my concern really is for the staff capacity. Sarah needs another assistant, and in addition to Jill, not instead of, and just to be able to manage the workload that we give to her, which is significant. I spent a significant amount of Sarah's time just getting my questions answered. So I'm concerned about making that step until we have that second person on staff for you. Not that you couldn't do it, but
So if we're all in that same place that we were last week, maybe it'd be good for us to take a short recess and wait for Jamie to come back and present some other maps. I want to caution us from just continually talking about the same thing over and over again. Yeah.
Agreed. I have the same thoughts. So I think if we can take Sarah, do you have a suggestion of how long of a break we should?
I would recommend that we take a 15-minute break at this point, and then if Jamie and that team is not done, we can come back at 6:56.
Okay.
And extend that break if needed.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will adjourn until 6:56. Okay, we are back on the record, but I think we need just a bit more time. So I'm going to extend the meeting or extend the adjournment, the break for another 10 minutes, which some will come back at 7:07. Okay, at 7:07, we appreciate everybody's patience and Jamie and Tyler's work on the fly to do a little bit of adjusting, and I will just turn it over to Jamie to share what they came up with.
Okay, first of all, I do want to publicly thank Tyler with our GIS department, because when everybody talks about all these maps I've made, that was Tyler that made these maps. And he was sitting down there and we were both able to kind of do this. When we say on the fly, he makes it look simple, but it's not. So this is what would be the new map. And if you notice, it's not very different. So if you scroll down, so what we did, and is there a pointer? So 39, 40, and 33.1, basically that's Mass Street, and below 33.1 would be 15th Street. And so north of South Park. In the blue, we moved those into the second district. So the second district would have everything east of Mass Street and West Mass Street down to South Park. Then these two areas right here move into the fourth. It was almost a 1-for-1 move. We couldn't do 10. It was too many people, but also for me, that would be putting Daisy Hill outside of KU. This is actually, if you think about, this would be 23rd Street up to 16th Street. That puts these neighborhoods kind of together, which I'm okay with. And that puts them in the fourth. What happened by kind of accident is the dividing line between the 10th House District and the 46th House District runs right here and right there. So it cleans up kind of between those two House districts. And when we built this map, we tried to clean up some of those House district lines. So making those changes keeps the population, it doesn't change the incorporated, and it basically keeps the population changes about the same. So we don't go out of deviation. It was about a 1-for-1 change.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. I really appreciate that. And thank you, Tyler, for being here with us tonight and being able to make those adjustments. Happy to hear that there was maybe a happy accident with aligning more with state house districts too. And that achieves a significant part of the goal for me, which is to keep that downtown Lawrence, East Lawrence community together and combined with North Lawrence. So I am good with those changes. Do commissioners have any questions? I guess I have one question, not specific to these changes, but I meant to ask earlier. In your memo, you talked about how District 3, which is yellow, would be was sort of on the low end in terms of the population distribution, which we've talked about being sort of okay and accounting for the fact that there is already some growth that's happened since the census in West Lawrence in District 3 and maybe some continued growth. I am curious what that deviation is, because all the other districts are really close. I'm just curious, is 11% the maximum deviation that was allowed? I know your goal was to keep it much lower than that, but.
Yeah, so 5% is what we were going for. Because I was doing those figures on the fly, 23,757. So that's a deviation of 11,187 is up to 5. The courts will say up to 10% is acceptable. And then so the deviation as it sits right now with District 3 is 1721. So it's about 600 out, or a little less than 600 outside that. And the reason I made that comment, actually up there where you see the kind of the circle that's 10. I built that as a new precinct about 6 years ago. It had 200 voters. It now has 3,000 voters. And it added, I think, 400 voters just this year. So that's why I was comfortable being outside that deviation a little bit.
Got it. Thanks for explaining that. Any questions from commissioners? Or thoughts?
I'm comfortable with the changes.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, then it sounds like we have successfully reached some consensus and per Commissioner Willie's sort of request earlier in point of order, I think we can call it to 2 separate votes and direct staff to make the staff has already drafted the resolution and made those changes so that we can move forward with that next step. So I will first move to approve what is titled as Douglas County H map with some slight changes from the one originally posted this evening. Move to adopt that as our new 5 districts.
One second.
All those in favor? Aye. And then we'll also go ahead and make a motion that we make a recommendation to the governor of Kansas to elect those 2 new commissioners in the next general election cycle.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioners, I would, so to pass that recommendation on to the governor, staff will draft a letter from the chair that indicates that, and we will send it to the governor's office tomorrow, pending blizzard.
Okay. Do you need anything else from us, Jamie or Tyler or Sarah?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you all. Thank you to the public who's stayed engaged with us in this conversation. We look forward to future and continued conversations and future elections and more engagement from folks throughout the county with what we do here at the County Commission. And thank you again, staff, for all your work and patience as we work through all these sort of nuanced details. That closes the end of our regular agenda, which I put away, and I'm sorry, I don't have right in front of me, but next is appointments, which I don't know if we have any that are pertinent right now. Thank you.
I don't think so, commissioners. I know we're working on a planning commission appointment, and I also have some senior resource center appointments, but I think I need a little, my hope is to bring them to you for that one to the first meeting in January.
Okay, thank you. So with no other appointment discussions, we will move on to the memo from Sarah and any miscellaneous items.
Thank you, commissioners. An updated memo is in the packet. I do want to point out that the city of Lawrence has rescheduled the land development code conversations for the rural areas roundtable discussion from tomorrow to January 13th from 2 to 3:30. It's gonna be both Zoom and a hybrid, but we'll try to get that revised information out so folks have a little bit more time to attend that. And just also added to the calendar is the swearing in ceremony for our new Judge Thiessen, the new first division judge will be on Friday, December 30th at 3. And that's all I have new in the packet, commissioners.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Any miscellaneous items or updates from other commissioners?
So I did want to share a little bit of our PERC meeting. And you might have read a little bit about it in the paper, but there was some discussion about the KU Crossing project that came here, and we got an update from Monty Sukup with KU Endowment about that project, and the commission as a whole expressed some concerns about that. I shared those concerns again at PERC. I was the only one who voted against it. It was 4-1 in favor of making the recommendation. But one thing that came up was that I don't recall hearing at our meeting here was that there was a veto period that began with the city commission's hearing on it. And that there is 30 days once the city commission hears it for us to veto it, or the school district can veto it. That ended on Friday. So I was a little bit disappointed to find out that that was the veto period and that we didn't have that information. I did have some exchange back and forth with Kano with the city economic development, and just sort of sharing with her some of my frustrations with that. And I think there will be other opportunities for us to weigh in with the city commission as this process continues. And that might be something we want to talk about in the future is what, if we have concerns about it, what we share. One of the things we did learn though with the TIF is if it's 95% with the city, it also has to be 95% with the county. I think that was something we talked about, like maybe we could have different percentages, and we were told that's not possible. So I think there's been some misinformation on this one. We don't do a lot of TIFs, so I'm willing to provide some grace in there, but I also must be honest, I'm a little frustrated with just how the process has taken place. It didn't go through the planning commission, which it typically does. And city staff has said like it doesn't have to, that's something we do. But I just think those are some of my concerns, commissioners, that I wanted to share with you as our representative on PERC.
I very much appreciate that feedback, and we were just shy of having any real numbers to work with at our meeting. And it seems like maybe order of operations that needs to be something that has some more attention given to it.
And city staff did say that they don't have to provide those numbers, that that's something that they do, but they don't have to provide them by statute. So Sarah and I visited, and we've had some conversations with city staff about how we might work together in the future on these things. Again, this is pretty rare. We don't see these very often, but I think it's really important that both the city and the entire community understand the different pressures on city versus county versus school board in approving a tax incentive. And I think we just all have a lot more work to do to understand how these work.
I appreciate you pointing out some things that you've learned, and maybe there'll be some opportunity to figure out sort of a to Commissioner Willie's point, a bit of an order of operations and mutual expectations about how that will go in the future and what kind of pieces of the process are important for us to consider. So thanks for that update. Anything else for the good of the order this evening? Okay, well then I will adjourn our last 2022 meeting.